My first speaker is going to be Mr. Jon B. He's going to come up. He's going to tell you about some of the tactics that he uses to catch the big ones. He knows about all the latest little tactics that you haven't heard of yet. He's just got a wealth of knowledge about that. So Mr. Jon B, come on up, take the stage, and tell us, drop some knowledge on us about fishing.
Before we begin, how many of you guys bass fish out here? Bass fishing? You guys all like catching bass, especially the bigger ones too. Today I'm going to talk to you guys about spring fishing. Spring fishing is one of the best times to get some of those big bass. Spring, fall, two of my favorite seasons. I'm a cold water angler. I love fishing when the bite's tough. Most down south anglers probably think I'm crazy for saying that, but I love fishing in tough conditions. Areas and places and in instances where it's hard to figure out what the fish are doing, what they're biting on, and kind of how I have to pin that pattern down. Like I said, the first initial time that I get to fish, as soon as when that ice thaws out, that's when I get the rods out. I'm already on the lake. Even if there's a little bit of ice on there, I'll wait until the sun come up, wipe it out, and I'll start fishing. And people don't realize you can catch fish right off the bat and ice out. And it's one of the best times to get out there and cast a line for the most part. And today I'm just going to go over a few lures that I like to throw during that time, specifically to target larger fish that are more clumped up right after the thaw. And I'm going to be kind of talking to you about where to find these fish. That's really key. It's for most anglers what to use, where to find them, what to look for. And I try to think of it as writing a book. You start off with a blank page, and the first couple pages are you trying to figure out what's going on with the fish. You're gonna get some stuff wrong, and that's all that is about bass fishing. It's trial and error. You're gonna get some stuff that's wrong, and you're gonna get some that works. So I'm gonna jump in right now to some of the first stuff that I throw as soon as ice out. A lot of people would be surprised. I like to stick to hard baits. I like to stick to baits that most anglers wouldn't normally think of throwing. In cold water temperature. As soon as that ice thaws out, the water's cold. And you get this thing called spring turnover, and that turns over the water and it churns it up. And usually, for the most part, most lakes have the same consistent temperature all throughout the water column. So you're not going to find, the top of the water is going to be hotter than, let's say at 10 feet. So a foot of water is going to be about the same as 10 foot, and you don't have to really worry about the temperature in different water columns. It's pretty much all going to be the same. Happens and you get a lot of wind, which you'll notice a lot in the springtime. You get that hot and cold weather meet up, and then it gets a lot of wind, starts churning some stuff up, and it creates for muddy, cold water. And that scares people. They don't want to mess with that. But there's ways you can overcome that and catch some good fish. Like I said, I like to start off with hard baits. A few of my favorite ones are square bills. I've got a variety here. I'm addicted to square bills. I've got 3 other boxes back in my home. Just full of these guys. I mainly stick to the Kevin Van Dam, the KVDs, not because he uses them, but because they're solid cranks. They've got good, strong hooks, a variety of different colors to choose from, personal preferences, what the fish are biting on, and they're pretty good price too. And what a square bill is, it's just basically a medium size to 1.5 size. It's a medium-sized crankbait that dives from about 2.5, depending on what brand you're getting. That may surprise some of you guys because that's kind of shallow, but like I said, those fish are starting to move up. It's the exact opposite of what they were doing in the wintertime. In the wintertime, they're moving down, they're getting dormant, their metabolism's slowing down. Thaws out, they're wanting to feed, they haven't been feeding for a long time, and they want to start packing on some of that bulk, getting heavy, and start feeding. This right here is one of those best baits to throw. What I like to do is normally try to look for laydowns, natural structure, riprap shoreline. What that is just a bunch of rocks piled up on the shoreline, big trees, logs, some trees sticking out of the water, and I like to get these guys as close as I can to some of those spots, and that scares people. When you start throwing these baits with a bunch of treble hooks on there right up against wood, because people are worried about losing lures. Don't be afraid to lose a lure. You're fishing in these areas that are tight corners where you're gonna lose some lures. I can't tell you how many lakes have eaten these guys. I've got a bunch of lakes back home in Illinois that have eaten these baits for my tackle box personally, but I've ended up catching a lot of really nice fish because I've taken the risk and done that. What I usually do is I'll pull up on the spot, ranging for about 5 to 7 feet of water, and I'll get that bait as close as I can, and I'll start cranking it back. I vary my retrieve. Sometimes I'll reel it in fast, sometimes I'll reel it in slow. It really all depends on what the fish are doing, if they're active, if they're not. But if, let's say the fish are a little bit more active, they're starting to feeding on shad, which is kind of the imitation and the go-to for that style of bait. I'll start reeling them kind of slow, and I'll start knocking it up against stuff that's down there. There's the lake. You want to fish for areas that fish can hide, they can stage up for spawning, and you want to get that bait to react to that structure, start hitting stuff, bouncing off stuff, and it looks kind of natural. You get right in front of the fish's face, and they're going to hammer it. Like I said, pretty cool bait, very versatile. You can throw them different retrieves. Sometimes I'll reel them, and I'll stop them, and I'll let them sink up just a little bit, and I'll start cranking it again. And you just kind of got to figure out what the fish want. I'll vary my retrieve. Let's say if I'm not getting anything on just a straight reeling, I'll cast it back out there and I'll twitch it. Nothing on that. I'll go to something different until I finally get something that clicks. Like I said, awesome bait. There's a variety of different colors. The colors I like to stick to aren't the most natural ones. I've got some shad imitation baits in here. But as you can see, I've got some weird colors in here that look a little different. This is a splattered bag. This is chartreuse. And you may ask why I even throw something like that. There's nothing in the lake that you fish that looks like that. But the thing is most of those lakes, people think that. They think you gotta match the hatch, and what that is you gotta throw something that looks like what the fish are eating. That works, but really what you gotta do is you gotta stand out from the crowd. Those fish get pressured a lot. They've seen a lot of this color right here. That's a natural shad. There's a sexy shad right there that looks more like a shad versus something that's kind of off the wall with a chartreuse and black back. And they see something like that, and it's different to them. It's changing up the game, and they'll kind of key on something that stands out, especially in dirtier water too. I like throwing this color. Dirty, shallow water, for some reason, man, this color just excels. I was out at a lake just last week, discharged lake, so it was open water. Big blizzard coming down, just snow all over the place, and the water's all churned up. It's muddy from the night before. There was a lot of wind. And a lot of people were throwing this, this color right here, these natural shad colors, and they were getting bit. They weren't getting, a bunch of fish, but they were getting bit, some decent 1-2 pounders. Throwing something like this. But my buddy and I, we kind of switched up. We started throwing these chartreuse colors. He had like a fire tiger red eye shad. This is red eye shad right here, and the fire tiger is just a funky green and yellow and black color. It's really wild, and we started throwing that along the bank. And we're kind of going along trying to hit these spots, and we're catching the fish. I mean, we were really putting the hammer on these bass, and these guys over here are scratching their head. They don't understand. They come up to us and they're like, "You're throwing a square bill?" And we're like, "Yeah." Same thing they're throwing. They're trying to think, well, what color? And then we start showing them throwing chartreuse and this dirty water. It changed the game up a little bit, and sure enough, of course they switched to it, and they started producing some pretty good bites too. And that's really what it is bass fishing. You've got to stand out from the crowd. Sometimes you've got to try new stuff. You got to step out from your comfort zone and throw a color that you're not used to. I know a lot of guys that just stick with these basic colors, and it just kills me because you got to have a little variety. You got to throw something that you wouldn't normally throw in order to get a bite. And that's something I had a problem with. I had a huge problem with not being able to just kind of go outside the box. I'd see people catching them on this, and I start throwing this. I would never try my own thing. I would really base my pattern, what I caught the fish on what other people were doing. And that's just not the way it works, really. I mean, especially nowadays when you've got some of these public lakes that are getting hit a lot. I know there's a lot of public lakes around here that get pressured a ton. And that's going to help you out a lot, is stepping outside and throwing something different that you don't think anyone else is doing. Going back to the spring bite mainly, like I said, I love the square bill, and especially in that color in the dirty water. I know we're getting a lot of dirty water this year with all that snow coming in. Some of those lakes, a lot of running water is going to turn up some of those lakes, and this color is going to excel a lot. But another one I like to throw when the water temp's super cool. I tend to throw this when it's a little bit warmer, not straight off the bat, but I do have a lot of luck with this when the water temp's cold. But when it's really cold, like we're talking high 40s, low 50s, I like to go to spinnerbait. I don't have one with me, but there's some throughout the store. And I like throwing a chartreuse, white, double oil leaf spinnerbait. And I usually throw them in like a 3/8 ounce size, nothing too heavy, because I'm fishing in shallower water this time of year. And that bait just kills, man. It's a fantastic lure. Again, you use it the same way you do this. I bump it off of structure, I bump it off of brush piles to get those fish to hit. Give you guys an example. I was at a tournament 2 years ago on Lake Clinton. It's a big lake in Illinois. A lot like some of these lakes around here. Very pressured. I mean, guys coming out there all the time, and it was right on ice out. And this lake's got, you know, a discharge on the south side. On the north side, it's cold. So on the south side, you got 60-degree water temps, pretty warm for that early in the season, early March. And on the cold side, it was like, I don't know, man, 50, low 50 degrees. It was just brutal. And we see all the boats take off, 50 boats. One of the biggest tournaments I ever fished. 50 boats, about 100 guys. It was a team tournament. And me and my buddy are watching all these boats come out. I think we drew number like 30. It was brutal. We had to wait for all these guys to come out. But we're watching them all come out and they're going left. They're going to the south side where all the hot water is, which would make sense, right? You think, you know, these fish want the warm water, large amount of the warm water fish, and they're going to go to where the warm water is more comfortable. You know, that's what you would do mainly. You know, you don't want to stand outside, your lunch outside in the cold weather. You're going to come inside in the warmer weather and, you know, eat your meal. That's what most of those guys were thinking. We saw these boats go to the south side. And we thought, you know, why not just try the north side? We saw a few other kind of go that way, and there was some good stuff over there. There was some good brush piles, some lake fork looking stuff. There was just trees coming out. It looked like where a bass would go, but the problem was the water was cold. It was low 50s. So we get the boat up, we go to back there, and we pull up to this spot where it's a long cut, really long cut. And there's just trees sticking out of the water. It looked like a submerged forest. It was incredible. It looked great, but I'm looking at the graph and the water's cold. I'm like, I don't know if we're going to be back here too long. And you see one guy back there, one local back there. He's back there and he's chucking a spinnerbait. He's moving real fast. He's got the toy motor on high. But he's reeling his spinnerbait in slow. He's making a lot of casts, a lot of short casts. And we pull up to him and we're like, all right, let's see what this guy's doing. And we asked him, he's like, you have any luck with that? And he's like, well, since you guys are the only ones out here, I'll let you guys on the secret. He's like, yeah, I mean, the fish are biting the spinnerbait in this cold water. So we were confused, and we go back there, and I tie on the spinnerbait, of course, and I'm trying it out. First couple of casts, I'm out there, I'm reeling fast, nothing. And I thought, all right, why don't I slow it down? The water's cold. While these fish do want to feed, you still got to kind of work with them. If the water's cold, they're not going to be moving as fast as they would in the warmer temps. I'm going out there, I'm reeling it real slowly, and I'm bumping it off a bunch of structures and brush piles. I hit like a lay down a submerged tree, and boom, I just get slammed. One of the hardest hits I've ever felt in probably the 5 years I've been bass fishing, and just started feeling drag on my bait caster, and I was like, man, I'm tightening this thing up. It was about a 3-pound, real nice fish, real nice fish, and I was so confused. I mean, why did that fish hit it so hard, and why was he there in that cold water? It was about 6 feet of water. You know, that's really crazy. 6 feet of water in that low temps is just something that you wouldn't expect. So my buddy goes in the back, throws back in there too. After 2 casts, he backs a 5-pounder. So now we were onto something. We figured out. And the point is the fish were. We think that the fish were back there because they were spawning. You know, that area was a good spawn area for them. Straight out of spring, these fish have to think about reproduction. You know, food is up top there on their list of things that they need, but reproduction is also a main one. You know. And this area had a real nice sandy substrate, the kind of stuff that fish need, these bass need to spawn. And there was a lot of brush and timber and stuff like that. And what these fish were, they were females. They were getting ready, they were moving up from their winter spots, and they were getting ready to spawn. And they weren't necessarily feeding this hard, but they saw that spinnerbait right in front of their face, and they took the opportunity to hit it. So that's something you got to keep in mind too, is these fish don't necessarily want to chase down your bait. You got to slow down for them. You got to take that time to reel. I mean, we were just creeping that spinnerbait. You got to take the time to creep that spinnerbait up and reel it in real slow. And that's all really is to it. Is you gotta think about what the fish are doing. Are they feeding? Are they getting ready to spawn? Are they doing a little bit of both? And the guys that came back from the hot water discharge that day had an okay day. Most of the guys that did better were on the colder side. They were doing similar to the same stuff we were doing. They had huge bags. I think the winning bag was 21 pounds and 50-degree water temp, low 50-degree water temp. Which is crazy for most of the guys that bass fish in cold water. But another example too is just kind of, you know, slowing it down, not necessarily thinking because these fish want to feed or getting right out of it, because that's the biggest misconception. People think they haven't been feeding all winter, so they're gonna for sure hit your bait, and that's not always the case. They get a little bit iffy sometimes right out of their winter holes. But a spinnerbait, square bill crankbait, 2 baits that I really like throwing. The other one that I don't have with me is a football head, not a football head jig, but a 3/8 ounce to a smaller. I like throwing even a 1/8 ounce jig. There's this one that I really like throwing. I've been using for 3 years now. It's not sponsored by them, but it's an all-terrain tackle jig. great solid jig. Something about the skip and jig head on it just absolutely whacks the bass. And I like throwing that around the same stuff. I throw the square bills and the spinner baits. I like throwing it on woody areas, places where there's a lot of sunlight, where it's about mid-level depth, 7 to 9 feet. And I mean, I really fish that jig slow in the colder water. And a bass, a jig about that size will catch you some of your biggest fish this spring. I mean, I can't stress enough how important that lure is when these fish are getting ready to spawn. For some reason, in springtime, that jig just really excels and puts some of the larger fish into my boat. What I'll do is I'll pull up on the similar spots where there's a lot of wood. I make sure that there's sun hitting the bank, a little bit of wind, and I'll start pitching to the laydown and I'll start working. And I'll work every single area. If I'm presented with a laydown or a brush pile in an area where there's not a whole lot around, it's just very sparse, very low area of natural structure, I'll work that. I'll work it really hard. A lot of guys will just come up to it, pitch it, give it 3 casts, and then that's it. They'll drive off. They'll walk away from the bank or something like that. But the most important thing you can do is work that, make sure you get every single angle, because, like I said before, these fish aren't going to go after it head over heels for some of your baits. You got to get it right in front of their face. You got to work it, and you got to make sure it looks as natural as possible. You got to make sure it's right in front of their face, because, like I said, they're not going to chase it down. So, like I said, I'll pitch it. I'll work it up and over some of those branches, and I end up losing a lot of lures. It happens, but some of those lures make up for some of those 3-4 pounders that I get in the boat at the end of the day. That's really key, is just kind of looking for areas like that with a lot of wood, a lot of sun. Sometimes wind can be your friend when you're throwing reaction baits like these, spinner baits and square bills, but I tend to throw the jigs on a little more calmer shoreline and things like that. But you know, that's kind of what I just wanted to stress to you guys today. That's pretty much my presentation. All it is just kind of slowing your presentation down if need be. You know, switching up your colors, kind of looking for something that an angler wouldn't normally hit, and take risks. It's all about, you know, taking risks when you're on the water bass fishing. You've got to do something that maybe you wouldn't normally do. Step outside your comfort zone. Throw in an area where you're probably going to get snagged, but you're also probably going to catch a fish. So with that being said, thanks for listening. Do you guys have any questions? Yeah.
How many casts do you usually go with before you decide to either move on or maybe change your lure?
Yeah, you know, I mean, it really all depends on how big the structures I'm working with. So like, let's say I'm working a dock that's about, you know, about that wide and, you know, so many feet long. I try to get every pylon. So, like, let's say there's 6 pylons, 6 poles on each side. I'll give it about 12 casts. It really is, it may seem unnecessary, but there may be just that one fish on that middle pylon that you might have skipped. Something like a brush pile, you know, I try to work it as much as possible as to where I can feel, you know, my jig going all over those branches. At minimum, I'll do 10. I've stuck at a laydown for all day. I'm not even kidding. I've had this big laydown. I've got a video of it, and there's this big laydown, and it's just sitting right on this point, and I swear I got my boat right up on it. I mean, I'm nosing this laydown, and I'm just dropping the jig. I'm picking fish out of every single entanglement. And most guys, they come up to that and they catch the fish, and they be like, "Oh, nice fish," and they pull off, not knowing that they just left a 3, 4, 5 pound bass in that spot. And it's crazy because you catch those fish, you put them back in, you know, you go to the other spot, and then you come back and you work the other side, and you start catching them again. That's another thing too, is if you start catching fish and they start dying down, ease up on it a little bit, you know, start working it too heavy, because you can come back just in a couple hours when the weather's a little bit different, there's a little bit more sun, maybe some more wind or something like that to push fish in there, and there'll be some more fish in that spot. So, like I said, it depends on the size, the type of structure, but 10 minimum, really. That's kind of what I would do. Anyone else?
What ratios do you use on those?
For jigging or cranking. Yeah, with the cranking, like something like this, I usually throw a 5.5 to 1 or a 6.4 to 1. 5.5 to 1 in the colder weather, because I like fishing fast and I gotta tell myself to slow down. So that allows me to reel fast but have the bait move slow, opposed to a 7.1 to 1 where I'm reeling fast and that crankbait's burning. And it's moving right past those fish. With the 5.5 to 1, sometimes I'll just go like this, even though it's already moving real slow. But with a jig, 7.1 to 1 for sure. I need something that can pick up that line fast so I can set the hook. Especially with some of those laydown fish, they'll hit it and run right at you. So you got slack lines, so you're like, you gotta reel up on them real quick and then set the hook. But yeah, I've got a variety of different gear ratios. The higher the gear ratio, the faster the line's going to come in. So jigs, plastics, sometimes jerk baits. But with cranks, I like to stick to something a little bit slower, between that 5.5 and 6.1 for sure.
Get it for the game.
Yeah. I mean, it's all about just kind of maintaining that bait in that water column to where you think those fish are, or where they really are. That's pretty much it. Anyone else? And like I said, I'll be walking around throughout the store, so if you guys want to ask me some more questions, I appreciate it. Thanks for listening, guys. Good luck this season as well, and good fishing to you all.
Right. Jon B of Fishn in the Midwest. Young guy with a lot of knowledge about tips or about tactics to catch fish, especially in pressured water and in cold water.